Hi, my name is Fernando Rаймерс, and I am the Ford Foundation Professor of the Practice of International Education at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. I am delighted to be joining you thanks to the affordances that technology provides us in this forum on the future of education in Bulgaria. And my goal in this presentation is going to be to address some of the challenges that I believe you face in Bulgaria. Let me begin with the population challenge. This is a representation of the population pyramid of Bulgaria. These are the number of people between the ages of 0 and 4, number of people between 5 and 9, 10, 14, and so on. What you see is that you have a lot of people between the ages of 25 and 85. And in fact, if you look at 50, about half of your population is past the age of 50. What does that tell you? That the number of people who are in an age of being productive workers is a proportion of a population that is aging. And in the future, you're going to have a significant number of people who are going to be retirees who will need to be supported by a relatively small base of the population. Now, contrast these with 4 other nations. For example, Singapore, just the opposite. What you see is that Singapore is a rather young nation. You have most of the population under the age of 40, and very few people of this age. Look at China. China looks in between Singapore and Bulgaria. You have a big wedge of people between the ages of 20 and 65, but still a sizable percentage of the population before the ages of younger than 30. And look at Brazil in contrast. This is a rather young population, a lot of people in the base of the pyramid. So what does that mean for a country of 7-8 million people? That it is very important that you invest in the human capital of your people, that you help them develop the capacities that they can generate and sustain a knowledge-based economy that generates sufficient value added to support all of the people, and hence the imperative for education. So the key messages of my presentation are going to be that in order to do that, it is very important to make sure that education is highly relevant to the needs both of your economy, but also to the capacity of building the economy of Bulgaria in the future. Second, in order to produce that, it's important to transform education systems so that they're well aligned. There isn't a single intervention that is going to produce that. Obviously, as I will describe in a moment, having a relevant curriculum is key, a curriculum that engages students with opportunities for them to build capacities that help them become entrepreneurial, innovative, creative, invent the future. But of course, curricula don't teach themselves. If you're going to change the curriculum to make it more ambitious and more relevant, you're also going to have to create opportunities for teachers to learn to teach in new ways, to learn to engage their students in ways that also help develop this entrepreneurial mindset, these inventive capacities, develop agency, capacity to be self-authoring individuals. But then you're going to have to align that with the resources that exist in the schools, with the ways in which schools are governed, with the autonomy that schools have to decide what to teach and what to teach, and with the examination system, the assessment system. So we call that producing systemic coherence, alignment between the various components that can support a highly relevant curriculum. But given the age of your population, it would be insufficient to concentrate exclusively in what schools do for students, say, who are younger than 18. It is very important to build an infrastructure that can support lifelong learning, to build the capacities through partnerships between employers and educational organizations using innovative programs such as online learning for your adults to continue to build their own skills, to reinvent themselves multiple times. To do that, it's important to build an innovation ecosystem. No single institution could, in a country the size of Bulgaria, single-handedly address all these challenges. So what is essential is to build an ecosystem that not only encourages, incentivizes innovation, but also provides the support so that that innovation can scale and can be mainstream through the regular public education system. In order to do that, building public-private partnerships are one of the avenues to do that. This is a task that takes all of you. And I know that at this conference, there are many of you who represent government and public schools, but also many of you who represent the business community. And I hope that in these conversations you're having about the future of education in Bulgaria, you will explore the role that public-private partnerships can play in building and sustaining this innovation ecosystem. Now, let me give you a little bit of context for the remarks that I'm going to make, the foundation for these takeaway messages. I lead the Global Education Innovation Initiative at Harvard, which is a research and practice collaborative with partners in a range of nations. Our goals are very simple: to understand the way in which education leaders and practitioners in diverse education systems define and practice teaching and learning, which is relevant to the 21st century. Hence, the first message: make sure education is relevant, in order to support schools so they can empower students to thrive. Can empower students to decide what kind of lives and careers they want to pursue, with the skills to do that, with skills to be self-sufficient, and to be contributing members of their communities and obviously of their economies. We accomplish those goals through three sets of interrelated activities. We conduct applied research, fairly simple and rapid studies that can speak to governments, that can inform questions of policy relevance. We also create opportunities to support the establishment, the development of that ecosystem, of that shared vision among the stakeholders, the various stakeholders that need to collaborate to have a coherent, innovative ecosystem. And lastly, we develop simple tools and protocols that can support teachers and school principals in enacting a renewed way of teaching and learning. I'm going to illustrate each one of those three sets of activities with a few examples. These are the countries in which we work at the moment: Brazil, Chile, China, Colombia, France, India, Japan, Mexico, Russia, Singapore, and the United States. So on research, the very first activity that we conducted was a synthesis of the research on what are the capacities that matter in the 21st century, and then develop a taxonomy based on that synthesis to examine the national curriculum frameworks of six of the countries, the 6 countries in which we began our work. And we published that work in the book Teaching and Learning for the 21st Century, which you can obtain from Harvard Education Publishing. And the conclusions of that book can be synthesized in 2 main points. The book has been translated into a range of languages and has made part of national efforts of transformation of national curriculum and standards. So those skills are expanding in all of the countries that we studied, whether those countries are China or Chile or Colombia or the United States or Mexico. And from an early emphasis on knowledge and the skills to use knowledge to solve problems, there is now an expanded and enhanced, a more ambitious set of capacities that includes, of course, cognitive skills, but also includes self-knowledge and self-regulation, as well as the capacity to work with other people, to collaborate, and to lead others. And this is what various education systems are trying to do. An example of that is this is a synthesis of the area of foci of the national curriculum for Singapore. It's a curriculum that has, at the core, it is anchored in the development of an ethical foundation, core values, and that identifies a number of core competencies: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship management, and responsible decision-making, so that students can collaborate and have information, have civic literacy, global awareness, and cross-cultural skills, critical and inventive thinking. And the goal is that this would produce a confident person, a self-directed learner, a concerned citizen, and an active contributor. Note how this representation of the curriculum doesn't begin with subjects, with the traditional disciplines in the curriculum. Rather, it begins with the roles that graduates of schools are expected to play in society and naming the competencies that they will need to perform those roles. It's not that Singapore does not teach math or language or science. They do teach all those things, but they try to align those means with these ends. And what they try is to have tremendous clarity, and especially shared clarity, across all grades in the same schools, across all staff in schools, across various schools, across schools and the Ministry of Education, as well as across schools, the Ministry of Education, and the National Institute of Education, which is a singular institution that is in charge of initial teacher preparation and school principal preparation. And that alignment, that shared set of purposes, contributes to the kind of systemic coherence which is essential to transform an education system, to enable an education system to embrace a more ambitious set of goals such as these ones. So, for example, one of the very first things that Singapore did was to review their programs of initial teacher preparation and align them with this particular vision. This is a task that any country that tries to expand the definition of what students should learn should do. But obviously, it's a little easier to do that in a place where enough time is invested in building that communication, in building those relationships, and where there is a single institution that prepares all the teachers. It's a little easier to do it there than in a place where communication is a bit of an afterthought, or really not something that is very well attended to, or where there are very many institutions involved, where the preparation of teachers is shared in a fragmented ecosystem of institutions. So the second study that we conducted follows on this one, and it's a study of high-quality programs that attempt to build the capacities of teachers to educate the whole child, support teachers in teaching to this expanded range of competencies. And what we did in a series of comparative case studies in China, in Singapore, in India, in Colombia, in Chile, in Mexico, and in the United States was to ask, what do these programs that are renowned because they have an ambitious set of goals and because they are seen, and in some cases there is evidence that they are indeed effective at preparing teachers to do that, what do they have in common? How are they similar? And we found striking similarities, in effect, the shared DNA that all these programs have. And this study is published in a recent book that just came out titled Preparing Teachers to Educate Whole Students, which is also available from Harvard Education Publishing, just as this book. And some of the common DNA includes things like professional development, in-service professional development, reflects a conception of adult learning that sees learning as socially situated and responding to needs that teachers have and perceive to have. Now, these programs build professional development that is meant to help teachers address their needs identified by themselves, but not only help them as individuals. These programs are designed to help schools achieve organizational goals. They are meant to build the capacity of entire institutions to embrace a set of goals. So, for the most part, these programs do not engage teachers solo, individually, but they engage a large proportion of teachers in the schools and engage with them over an extended period of time, often multiple years. This professional development involves multiple forms of professional development. They are not about a short course where teachers are pulled out of their classroom to be inspired by a set of new ideas, but they include reflective practice, experimentation, communities of practice, shared programs of inquiry and reflection, as well as groups of study within the school and across schools. The curriculum is in itself, this curriculum of programs developed to build the capacity of teachers to educate the whole child, actually walks that same talk in trying to help educate the whole teacher. So they build not only the cognitive capacities, the pedagogical skills, not only increase the repertoire of teaching techniques of these teachers, but also help them develop more self-knowledge, more self-regulation, more self-capacity for self-management, as well as build their capacities to collaborate with others, to build these professional communities so that they can be resources to each other, they can hold each other accountable and support each other's learning. The curriculum of these programs reflects a view of learning which includes cognitive skills in interaction, in relationship with social-emotional skills for their teachers. And professional development includes from very simple, granular things like routines and protocols and techniques to more conceptual, more high-level, abstract, theoretical opportunities to understand the principles that justify, that connect with those practices. The third study that we conducted is an evaluation of the impact of a very simple program designed to build the entrepreneurial skills and mindset of youth in 6 countries in the Middle East. It's a program of Junior Achievement, the Arab affiliate of Junior Achievement International, that basically brings to the school a member of the business community that helps high school students to learn to create a company. And what we did in this book was to evaluate what changed. How did students change as a result of learning how to create a company? How did they change not only in terms of their specific knowledge of business and their specific company that they built, but in the views that they held about themselves, in their confidence about the future, in their self-knowledge, in their capacity to relate to others, in their attitudes towards others, along many dimensions of difference in identity. The second set of activities that we conduct, which might be relevant to those of you who try to build this, let me just go back for a moment. On this research, one of the findings, particularly in the second study that looks at programs of teacher professional development, in most of those programs, there is a partner of schools that is an organization of civil society, either an NGO or a company that works with networks of schools and that serves the role of facilitator of innovation in the school, but also of knowledge manager that can take lessons from one school, brings them to other schools. So they all illustrate this principle that public-private partnerships can actually support the creation of this innovation ecosystem. The second set of things we do, we call informed dialogues. They're basically opportunities for various stakeholders to come together and to learn together what should be a more ambitious vision of education and how do we achieve that vision? What is it that we need to change? What kind of supports we need to provide schools? And we have published 2 books around that. The first one was essentially a study group of stakeholders in Massachusetts that looked at how in the state we prepare teachers, what our initial education looks like, and then we contrasted that with the way in which Singapore is transforming its initial teacher preparation to align it with an ambitious vision for education. And the second set of informed dialogues were a series of dialogues about the challenges of bringing to scale these reforms that are meant to make education more relevant. And lastly, we produce simple practical tools that can help a teacher figure out what do I do differently on Monday morning. And I want to refer to 3 of them. The first one, these are curriculum resources essentially, is a full kindergarten through high school curriculum aligned with the World Economic Forum Global Risk Assessment Framework, as well as with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And what this curriculum tries to do is to bring ambitious problems of the world, ambitious challenges, as the motivator of a pedagogy that gradually builds the capacities of students to not only understand these challenges, but have the capacity to contribute, to manage those challenges, to address those challenges. The second book is a more accessible version of the same curriculum. It's the book titled Empowering Students to Improve the World in 60 Lessons. And in addition to including a set of 60 lesson plans from kindergarten to high school, this book also includes a protocol designed to help schools build a community of practice within the school to begin to make the curriculum and instruction more relevant to these goals. And lastly, the more recent book, Learning to Collaborate, provides 7 pathways to aligning instruction and pedagogy and curriculum with ambitious challenges such as the UN Sustainable Development Goals. What they all have in common is that they reflect one of the findings of this work, which is that one of the ways to build these 21st century skills, one of the ways to open the door for innovation in the schools is to engage teachers and principals and other education staff in a discussion of what is the purpose of education. And one of the ways to make this discussion concrete is to take on big challenges, such as the challenge of poverty or sustainability or creating, developing and using clean energy or reducing climate change, and translating that into opportunities for project-based learning, for instruction in the school that would help the students connect with those purposes and build the capacities to address them. As part of that work, I have worked with many professional development communities of teachers around the world, and I'm persuaded that there is great opportunity in just bringing teachers not only from the same school together to have the conversation about what is it that we're trying to teach, what competencies do we want our students to gain, but how do we get there? But there is great value in connecting those communities across schools. And in effect, in the book, Preparing Teachers to Educate Whole Students, that is what we found, that these various organizations that provide in-service support in different ways build networks of schools and make it possible for teachers to learn not only from their own experience, but to help their peers learn from them, and build an innovation and learning ecosystem. And so to conclude, my hope is that those of you meeting at this terrific gathering, which I wish I could be attending in person, will do everything you can to build public-private partnerships that contribute to making education more relevant in Bulgaria, that will produce the kind of systemic alignment, coherent alignment in your public education system to deliver an education that is more relevant, that will extend outside the school in creating opportunities for lifelong learning, not only for teachers and educators, but essentially for all your population, given that your population is aging and you have many people who are past the age of going to school, but they too need the opportunity to continue developing knowledge and skills. And lastly, and the most important challenge, which I think this gathering could address, is you need to build an innovation ecosystem that supports experimentation, learning, and continuous improvement in your schools. I wish you the best in your deliberations in this conference.